Hello everyone, welcome to Kinesiology 2030 and Lecture 11, Nutrition Simplified. So the reason I created this lecture was to help us identify a easier way of understanding how we can deliver the message of good nutrition and good food. I think right now what's happening with nutrition is with the amount of different research that comes out on nutrition almost daily, um, it gives us a little bit of a better understanding of how to help people decipher what's going to be best for them. And nutrition is overwhelming for people. It's complicated for people, and as health advocates, health professionals, we need to make sure we can help people simplify how to eat. And so, what I've done in this lecture essentially is just that: left a lot of the scientific implications out of nutrition and just going to talk about food and talk about how we can eat better and how we can help people eat better. And as health advocates and health professionals, healthy eating starts with us. And if we can eat healthily and properly for ourselves, then it's a lot easier to help others. So I'm hoping this lecture will do just that. It will give you an idea of how to simplify food and nutrition. I definitely think it's important as kinesiologists to understand the molecular structure and the level of nutrition, and we will go over that after this lecture. But I definitely think simplifying it is important as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is first two books that have been really influential in my nutrition and food development. And that is one that's called Good Calories, Bad Calories, and another one that is called In Defense of Food. Both of these are tremendous books to help understand the history of nutrition and as well as help really identify what the problem with nutrition is and how to just do that, simplify it. In Defense of Food is a short book. It's a quick read. It's a good read. And it really simplifies food and helps you identify what we should be eating and what we should be maybe not eating as much. Good Calories, Bad Calories is a thick book. It's big. It's a lot of pages. It's got a lot of information. It will provide you with some of those mind-blowing moments because it really dives into the history of nutrition and how certain nutritionists and scientists change the way we think about nutrition today based on some of their hypotheses and really lack of evidential research. And a lot of it we still believe today. But what we're starting to see is a little bit of a shift, and we're starting to understand that research in the past may not be the best. So it's a good book. It took me a while to read it because I had to put it down at times and really digest a lot of the information that was being put out there in this book. But it's definitely one of those books to just keep on your bedside and read every once in a while and go through it because it's definitely an impactful book. The first thing I want to talk about is a little bit of a mantra in Michael Pollan's book, In Defense of Food. And that's this saying that he had: eat food, but not too much, mostly plants. And this here is really what got me going and thinking about how we need to simplify food, because when it comes down to it, that's all we really need to do is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And the better understanding we have of what this mantra is and how we can apply it to everyday life for both general population, athletes, weight loss, weight gain, it's going to help us set ourselves up for success. The only thing that I would want to suggest to add to this mantra is instead of eat food, make it eat real food. Because that's what we want, is we want to make sure that we're eating real food. And what real food is it's recognizable, and it only has one ingredient, and that ingredient we should be able to pronounce. Also, the ingredient is something that should nourish the body at all levels. And really, the closer one gets to real, which can be thought of as closer to the way it would appear in nature, the more nourishing the food becomes. The other thing to think about is organic, local, and seasonal products, as these are the best ways to get the most out of your food. Now, if you choose to eat animal products, ethical considerations and quality play a pivotal role in either creating nutrient dense superfoods or inflammation bombs for your body. It is almost important, it's also important to note that following a nose to tail approach, which means eating all the different parts, including organs, provides the body with density of balanced nutrients that is unparalleled to anything else that we eat. So, eating specific parts in excess, so for example, if we just buy one select cut of meat on repeat, it does not create the optimal level of nutrient availability to the body. In many cultures, making use of every part of the animal is part of honoring its death for your meal. And I think that's an important consideration to think about. Now, when it comes to eating real animal products, here are some basics when it comes to finding the highest quality. So, when it comes to beef, dairy, bison, lamb, we should be eating grass fed, pasture raised, organic beef, dairy, bison, or lamb. When it comes to chicken and eggs, it should be certified organic and pasture raised, and pork should be organic pasture raised. So that's things to look for when purchasing meat, and then that you know you're going to be getting the highest quality meat, and it's also more than likely going to be a little bit more ethical. Now, I know vegans, vegetarians would argue with me that eating meat isn't ethical, but if you are a meat eater, then you need to understand that there are ethical considerations you can take into play in order to pick the correct type of meat. And those little guidelines there are the best ones to do. So, when it comes to real plants are grown in real soil. And we're going to talk about something called regenerative agriculture in a little bit as well, to understand what real soil means. We also want to make sure these plants have matured naturally, so not picked when unripe on the other side of the world and then selectively ripened before selling. Also, seasonal appropriate is another way to look at real plants as well. So, the best way to buy your plants is really in this order: local. So, this is the most important as it means that the plant is likely suited to your growing region. It's had time to mature naturally and was picked recently. Many small farmers have excellent growing practices that are organic in nature but cannot afford the organic label. So, another great reason to get to know your farmer as well as their farming style. So, organic. This is almost as important as buying local. Personally, I prefer to buy local over organic, but if there's no way of buying something local, I will look at organic. So, organic products have minimal products used on them. So, this actually allows them to strengthen naturally against the environment. So, stronger plants equals higher nutrient levels and better flavor. It also means your body has less pesticides, as in pesticides, to process. And then seasonal. Seasonal plants were, again, likely picked recently in your region, meaning they have higher level of nutrients in them. So that's another thing to think about is, I mentioned that in the last lecture about frozen fruit. A local frozen fruit sometimes is going to be better than a imported fresh fruit because it is likely been picked recently in our region and it's going to have higher levels of nutrients. Now, the other part of this, this little mantra is not too much. So, what do we mean by not too much? Well, there's these areas in the world that are considered blue zone areas. And what they mean by blue zone areas are essentially areas in the world where uh, we see a lot of healthy individuals. Um, we see life expectancy high. We see rates of cancer low, rates of heart disease very low, and they're given these blue zone area designations. Now, in some parts of Japanese culture that are in the blue zone areas, they will eat until they feel 80% full. So essentially eating 8 parts out of 10. So they don't eat to full capacity. They actually only, they leave a 20% a 20% area that they won't be full. So they don't pack themselves until they are absolutely stuffed. And by eating 80% full, that means they're not eating too much food. Now, however you decide to interpret this not too much message, there are some basics that can help us. Things like portion size, right? So choosing smaller portion size. Some people go as far as getting smaller plates. Um, Another thing to do is eat slower. A lot of us eat so fast, and that will actually make us eat more. So if we eat slower, we will again decrease portion size and we'll have a little bit more portion control. By eating slower, you're going to choose more. All right, you're going to choose more. You're going to chew more, and then chewing more, of course, will help with digestion, and it'll also help you feel full quicker. Now, another thing to do is feel positive throughout the meal, which is kind of interesting. So, by eating slower, chewing more, and feeling positive throughout the meal, it has shown to increase nutrient absorption, especially when eating real food. So, in order to help ourselves eat less or not eat too much, just eating slower, chewing more, and feeling more positive throughout the meal is a way to increase nutrient absorption to make you feel full faster. And what that's going to do is allow you not to eat too much. And that's, as the mantra says, is important. So when it comes to the mostly plants part, there are many interpretations of what makes an ideal diet due to the fact everyone is different in how they utilize nutrients and what types of foods are better for them. For every 10 people, there are 10 different ideal diets. One area of consensus that health professionals do agree on is that getting the majority of your nutrients from plants has a multitude of positive health implications for you and the planet. So that's why we want this mostly plant part. Yes, every single person's diet needs to be different because diet and nutrition is so individualistic. That is an important thing to note down, especially if you're going to help others. It is important to understand that every single one of us is going to react differently to diets, nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, whatever it is. We all digest it differently. But the one thing that is consistent is plants are going to be the best for us. So what we need to do again is go back to how we pick the right kind of plants. And the key is to pick real plants. As I described before, we want to make sure that we pick real plants. So the market for plant-based products is growing because it's obviously something that is starting to become very culturally important and society important. So that means corporations will attempt to convince you that their plant-based products are better than the real thing. So a good general rule when picking plant products is if it has over one ingredient or it has ingredients that you cannot recognize, it's not real plant food. And the best example of that is the Beyond Beef burger. That right now is one of the biggest crazes. And what I want you to do is I want you to go search ingredients of a Beyond Beef burger. And what you're going to see is a whole bunch of ingredients that you've probably never heard of before. Because it is a corporation that is trying to convince and create a plant-based product that is not the real thing. So those Beyond Beef burgers are a great example of a plant-based food that is being created to try to capitalize on how everyone is trying to shift to a plant-based diet. I mentioned that last time. You know, gluten-free. Gluten-free was big at one point. So all these companies started creating their own gluten-free products. All right, now it's happening with the plant-based. Okay, so real plants, real food, that's a key. So a couple rules of thumb to go by. Again, this is really 6 points that helps people out. And really, to give someone the helpful yet very simple advice to just eat food, at first can seem strange. Really, of course we should eat food. What else is there available to eat? The answer? A ton. There's so much different food to eat. And the reality is that food is steadily being replaced in supermarkets by food products created by companies. The majority of what humans in the Western world are eating today is not food, but rather these food-like products that are being engineered, not grown, by large corporations. The question then becomes, how do we define food? So here we have a few rules of thumb outlined by Michael Pollan in the book Defense of Food that do a great job of helping us how to determine whether a substance is food or simply a food product. So the first thing, don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. Another way of putting it is to be extra safe. Don't eat anything our ancestors from 1,000 years ago wouldn't have eaten. That means Go-Gurts, Eggos, Lucky Charms, out of the equation, among 1,000 other similar products. I realize those types of foods are quick, they're easy, they taste good, but that can't be the main reason why we eat certain foods. Second rule of thumb, don't eat anything incapable of rotting. This is a big red flag that you should be looking at. So when we have food that is incapable of rotting, that means there's a combination of chemicals designed to essentially make the food edible for longer. But the problem is that makes it not real food. Number 3, avoid food products that contain ingredients that are unfamiliar, unpronounceable, more than five in number, also that include high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is something that has been created to be cheaper than sugar, and a high fructose corn syrup is one of the most deadly ingredients for the human body. It is causing a lot of inflammation and issues in our blood vessels because it is so unpredictable when it gets digested. And a lot of the times what happens is when the high fructose corn syrup gets into our bloodstream, it's actually bouncing all around off the walls of the blood vessels instead of just going through smoothly. So high fructose corn syrup is one that we should be really avoiding. 4, avoid food products that make health claims. In order to make food claims, a food first requires a package. If it has a package, it's automatically more likely to be processed. So when we have food products that are packages, well, that allows them to make the health claims. So we want to avoid those foods. We want to avoid foods that are saying low in fat, high in fiber, because it means that they are creating it in a way to make it low fat or high in fiber. Some cases, food's just naturally high in fiber, and companies are just kind of capitalize it on it, right? So we need to be aware of that. Number 5, when grocery shopping, shop at the peripherals of the supermarket. Stay out of the middle. This follows the conventional layout shared by most supermarkets, right? So they have the processed foods located in center aisles and fresh foods like dairy, produce, meat, fish lining the walls. So just stay on the outside. Just stay in the peripherals. Don't go into the middle. When you get in the middle, that's when you start getting into the non-real food. You start getting into the food products. If possible, get out of supermarkets whenever you can. If you can make that possible, then get out of the supermarkets. Go to farmer markets. Farmer markets have amazing whole fresh foods. There's no elaborate packaging, no food products, just fresh food purchased from the person who grew and cultivated it. All right, you can even go to farmer markets and get fresh baked foods. Now, this brings me up to another point, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we get into food products. Sorry if the transition between these slides was a little bit off. I had a little bit of a glitch, and instead of starting over, I'm just starting from this point. So if it seemed to cut off and then I'm starting here now, it's because there's a little glitch that I'm moving on into the next slide without restarting the whole lecture. So that's where the little break here may have happened, and the flow may have been broken up a little bit. But anyways, what I was saying, previous slide, what we need to understand is what food products are. So food products are an invention of the modern age. These are products that are engineered, so they're not grown, but they are manufactured, so not cooked. And what their intent is to be highly profitable and addictive edible items that many people, unfortunately, will confuse with food. So advertisers are really trying to target us with nonstop images of these products to try and entice us into purchasing them around the clock, and also when we can eat them. So these products prey on our natural affinity for calorie-dense, sweet, salty, fatty substances. That's what we like in today's society. We want food that tastes good, and food that tastes good are sweet, they're salty, they're fatty substances. All right? So unfortunately, the foods that have those types of calories that are found in these food products are usually just empty nutrients. So they're void of elements that help us feel full, but also provide us with the micronutrients that we need for a healthy body. And so what happens is all these processed foods that we're ingesting into our body has a really hard time digesting them with our ancestral machinery. So what happens is, if you think about real food is what our body is meant to ingest. It is what we have evolved into. And that's why all this food products that are coming out, why we're having so many diseases, is because our body wasn't evolved to eat all these manufactured food. Because really, if you think about it, in terms of the human timeline, the manufactured food has not been around for very long. So prior to when we had the Industrial Revolution and we started having, manufacturers coming up and creating packaged foods, is really when we started ingesting this food. And what we ate, what our ancestors would have ate, for the millions of years prior to this, is what our body has evolved into consuming and eating and thriving the best at. So when we ingest mainly these food products, and again, we talked about moderation. So I'm not saying that we can't enjoy some of these food products if there's something that you enjoy, but it's definitely something we want to limit very much so in our diet, because our body knows what to do with it, but clearly it doesn't know what to do with it when it's regularly ingested, because we're seeing the diseases of civilization on the rise, and these foods are a big contributing factor to it. So this brings me to a really important part that we need to understand as humans as well as consumers. And having good consumer skills is very important for health. And the one thing that we need to understand is our dollar is a vote. It's a vote to the companies that are producing these foods in what we want our bodies to have and what we want to purchase. So by putting our dollars into local farms, farmer markets, local butchers, local bakers, local shops, when we put our dollars into those types of companies, we are saying, this is what we want. This is how we want to eat. And the less dollars that go into those food products, well, that might be the way to change how they are delivering and packaging and what they're doing with food. Because it's important to know that as consumers, we should have the control, not the companies. The companies have the control now because they are putting out all the information and all the advertising that is making us want this stuff. So we want to make sure that we understand what we are putting in our body and what we're using our dollar for. And that's a really important thing to talk about and understand, because it's so important. And one thing I do, and I always suggest for people to do as well, is ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can when you go into any type of store that sells food, whether it's a grocery store, a farmer market, a restaurant. Ask questions. Ask how the food was prepared. Ask how the food was grown. Ask how the food was picked. It's okay to do that. It's okay to get a better understanding of what's happening. And that's one thing I always do, is if I'm at a restaurant and I'm ordering food, I'm asking, where did the meat come from? What company did you use to get the meat? How does the chef prepare it? I ask those questions because I need to know what I'm putting into my body, because I think it's important. There's some times where it's fine to just be like, I'm going to eat this because I feel like it and it makes me happy, and that's completely fine, as long as that's not a regular occurrence, because that's what's happening in our society. We're just mindlessly buying food and eating it thinking that it's going to help us be full, but it's not really nutritionally satisfying us. It's not giving us the nutrients that we need for health. Now, there's this concept that has come out that's called nutritionism. And somewhere in the past 30 years, humans in the Western world stopped eating food and started eating nutrients. This was a first in the history of our species and represented a shift in our relationship to food that has proved to be costly in terms of our health. So nutritionism, as a term, was coined by an Australian sociologist. His name was Georgi Shrins. His objective was to spread awareness that understanding food and our bodies in terms of their nutritional and chemical components is an overly reductionist approach. So nutritionism is not to be confused with nutrition, because the ism serves to suggest that it is not a scientific subject but an ideology. Ideologies are a way of organizing large amounts of our experiences under a set of shared but unexamined assumptions. Ideologies are hard to spot but immensely pervasive in culture. The assumption of nutritionism is that the key to understanding food is the nutrient, and since nutrients are invisible and mysterious, contrary to food, it's up to scientists to explain food to the public. A side effect of losing focus on nutrients contained in food instead of food itself is that the qualitative difference between whole foods and processed foods disappeared. By this metric, a processed food engineered to have the nutrient of the month included is looked as healthier than real food. So whole food, natural food, is, in some cases, they try to make whole food, natural food, seem less appealing. Now, this is a very dangerous road to go down because we don't want to feel like food that's engineered that has specific nutrients in it is going to be healthier than eating whole natural foods. So a big inbuilt problem with nutritionism is that it is biased to food manufacturers. It lets them create whatever they want based on the current nutrient trend and gives a justification for processing foods by including the healthiest ingredients. Now I have these two pictures up here. A picture of a plate with a bunch of different pills and then a picture of real food. Now, nutrition or nutritionism essentially suggests that science can create just like that plate of pills. Science can break down every nutrient possible and can put it into a pill form. So, based on what science has done to food, we could easily eat a meal of pills and get what we need in it. But is that going to be better for us than eating the food itself? Now, the problem is with nutritionism, and when you start really taking nutrients out or making foods with specific nutrients, is you potentially can lose the interaction they have with the other nutrients that are in the real food. So that's why it's important that we make sure that we understand what the real food is. And I'm not going to suggest that supplementation is bad. I believe supplementation has its place at times because sometimes we don't get enough of certain micro or macronutrients and we might need to supplement it. But again, the majority of our food should be coming from real food. And that's important. And what nutritionism can create. So what nutritionism can create is this orthorexia. And what orthorexia is essentially is what's happening with food. So no people on earth worry more about the health consequences of their food choices than those living in Western cultures, which ironically also happens to be the same people who suffer from the most diet-related health problems. Orthorexia is the term for a condition defined by obsessive behavior in pursuit of healthy diet. So basically people that have a healthy obsession with healthy eating. Based on our ancestral history, orthorexia is a new phenomenon and very unnatural for humans. Food was our only option because it was the only thing our habitat provided. So aside from determining whether something was poisonous or not, focusing on the healthiness of what we ate was never even on our radar. So that's one thing that nutritionism is starting to create, is really this obsessive mental health condition around eating healthy. And that's obviously not good. And again, it's why we need to make sure we're a little bit more mindful of what we eat and how we're eating, and how to make sure we're eating properly with the real foods. Now, another thing I want to talk about is understanding meat, because meat is a very, very controversial subject, um, especially when we have vegetarians and vegans involved. Like I said, I do not want to suggest that anyone's choice of what they eat is wrong. If you choose to be a vegan, vegetarian, or meat eater, if it makes you happy, then that's the most important thing. And I think so many times we get so worried about what other people think in terms of what we're eating, we lose sight of what's important. So let's talk about some facts when it comes to meat. First off, humans are adapted to eat and digest meat. So to say we shouldn't eat meat is not coming from rational biological perspective. Second, the amount of meat we consume today in the Western world and the way in which we harvest meat is unnatural and immensely harmful to the environment and the animals we are consuming. So that second one to me is the biggest problem. So meat is, as I mentioned, very controversial, and for good reason. It's a nuanced topic with a lot of elements that each deserve attention and discussion. But for the purpose of this lecture and this point of time, here are some general principles to think of. First, in general, people should eat less meat and spend more on the meat they do consume to make sure it is ethically cultivated and rich in nutrients. I think it's so important. And I mentioned this last lecture, and I have a visual up here. The serving sizes is key. We don't understand serving sizes, and we're eating too much of it. So one serving size of meat is literally the size of the palm of your hand. It's 3 ounces. And to understand that is important. Secondly, it seems like much of the health problems stemming from eating too much meat come from the fact that it's pushing plants off our plates. Plants are an immense source of nutrient-rich compounds that our bodies require, and by consuming less of them, we are missing vital dietary components. So having massive meat servings, we are eating less vegetables. So there are no compelling health reasons to exclude meat from the diet. However, the quality of meat you consume is a reflection of how the animal was raised. Although meat itself is not bad, the industry of meat today is producing poor quality meat, and that's creating problems we are not aware of. So focusing on where our meat is coming from is important. So meat is a great demonstration of concept that healthfulness of a food cannot be separated from the health of the food chain that it's produced. That includes the health of the soils that grow plants and the health of the animals from which we harvest. So again, it comes full circle, right? The healthier the food we eat, the healthier we are. So if we're eating meat, the healthier that animal is and the better that animal eats, we literally are getting a healthier option. Another saying from Michael Pollan's book is, we are, the old saying, we are what we eat. But really, we are what we eats. Because that is what it comes down to. And this whole meat problem comes down to the Western diet. The Western diet is a recent development in the history of humans, and a lot of smart people agree that it's a major factor contributing to health problems today. 4 of the top 10 causes of death today, cancer, coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes, are chronic diseases of civilizations that have well-established links to diet. These diseases were far less common a century ago, and they remain rare in places where people eat traditional diets, such as those blue zones I was talking about. The shift in what the Western world eats can likely be linked to industrialization of our food, the explosion of highly processed foods and refined grains, the superabundance of cheap calories contained in sugar and fat, and the narrowing of our diet diversity with a focus on a handful of staple crops like wheat, corn, and soy. This results in a diet consisting of mainly processed foods and meat, lots of sugar, and very little vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. It seems like wherever in the world the Western diet arrives, the common Western diseases then follow not long after. Although we don't have a definite causal mechanisms identified, it's fairly obvious to see that the Western diet is a huge contributor to Western diseases like obesity, diabetes, and cancer. Cultures around the world actually eat a very wide variety of diets: high fat, low fat, high carb, all meat, all plant. You name it. And there seems to be a culture somewhere that is doing it without health consequences. This serves as a strong hint that humans are able to eat mostly any kind of diet as long as it consists of real food. And the book Good Calories, Bad Calories dives into this and actually goes and looks at various research that in essentially gives people the Western diet that weren't eating it beforehand and just saw diabetes and high cholesterol and heart disease just increase from it. So modern nutrition science loves to tinker with the Western diet by adjusting levels of nutrients, but fails to see the problem is not the nutrient composition, but the actual food itself and how it's made and how it's consumed. And so that's why we really need to start asking questions about our food and understanding where our food comes. Buy local, buy organic, buy seasonal, use ethical cultivating butchers. It's important, and it's going to change our health if we start doing that more. Now, another part that we really have a problem with is our internal external cues when it comes to hunger and eating. So when it comes to food, knowing when to eat and how much to eat typically depends on the cues that can be received either internally by feeling full or by being hungry, or externally seeing food advertisements, eating until your plate is empty. Ancestrally, humans were very in tune to their bodies. They ate when hungry and stopped eating when they sensed the feeling of being full. External cues like plate size or billboards with donuts on them simply weren't factors. Today, many humans in the Western world, as countless scientific experiments have shown, rely on external cues, and this is a part of the problem when it comes to food. Our reliance on external cues has not only led us to eat more frequently and to eat more calories, but it has also disconnected us from the reliance on internal cues that are very important when it comes to eating behaviors. To help people get back to using internal cues, we must arm them with the awareness of the cues that prompt when to eat and when to stop eating. We need to help ensure that the public can protect themselves from tactics used by food companies to entice them into eating more frequently and to eat food products that are causing a large amount of preventable health problems presented today. So understanding our internal cues is important, and helping people understand that is important as well. There's another thing that's happening, and it involves cues as well, and that's mindless versus mindful eating. A lot of us are all guilty of mindless eating. Eating when you're bored. Eating because food or a food product was available and accessible. eating massive quantities simply because it was served to us at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. In Western culture, eating without even being hungry is common occurrence, and regaining control requires awareness of what mindless eating is and how to detect it. Mindless eating also refers to an ignorance around food itself, where it came from, how it got to our plate, what it was made from, and snacking in many cases is a great example of mindless eating. Mindful eating, on the other hand, is eating with a conscious awareness of why you are consuming food and better knowledge of what is happening to your food and how it's getting to your plate. One way to become more mindful with your eating is to devote time to growing a garden, small or large, and taking an active role in the process of food cultivation and preparation. I personally have a very small garden. It's called the urban garden, and it literally will grow a few edible plants. And you know what? It has completely changed the way I have thought of eating. It doesn't have to be a large garden to help you understand food cultivation and preparation. And it gives you a better idea of it. And it's important to do that. Now, I'm going to post a link up to Michael Wansink's talk about mindless eating. So you can check that out at another time. I don't want to put it up on here. You can just go to the link on the discussion board and check it out. It's interesting. It's interesting talk, and it's worth a watch. Now, another thing we should think about is having a food system in place, and this is when we start helping people identify how to eat properly. Is creating a food system. So goals are great, but it can be useless without a plan to execute them. So that's where a food system comes in. So systems are how goals can be reached without having to rely solely on self-control or discipline, which typically don't hold up when it comes to food. Our brains are wired to crave food that companies are all too happy to provide in the form of those food products. In order to defend yourself from the food industry, you must understand what the human brain is wired to crave and engineer an environment where the healthy choices is the only choice. Whether your system involves limiting food available in the home to you versus having more real food available, purchasing smaller plates to facilitate smaller portions, or applying food principles, having this system in place sets you up for success without the constant requirement to think about your behavior. So, here is just 5 ideas for a better food system that I've come across, which is a decent one, and it's just things like right to food. Everyone has a right to food. Understanding and respecting that is important. Making sure that food is healthy as well as sustainable. So you want to make sure you have sustainable food systems. You want your food to make sure that we eat healthily, but also have some reconciliation with it. And one thing I like too with this is more voices at the table. Couple reasons why I like this more voices at the table is because it's good to eat with people. Eating alone usually turns into eating too much and eating too fast. So more voices at the table to help us enjoy our food a little bit as well, but also to help people to have people in your house involved with getting food, purchasing food, cooking food, enjoying food. So more voices at the table sometimes is a good way to help eat better. Now, food principles, they don't tell you what to eat. They simply provide some simple things to keep in mind when it comes to food. And it can be powerful pieces of information to help the modern human make better choices when it comes to food. So here are some great food principles that were taken from Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food. So first, do all your eating at a table. This helps counter the rise of snack and restore power back to the meal. Eat at a table, not at your desk, or in a car, or while running to your next meeting. Just eat at a table and just enjoy it, because that's what eating should be. It should be an enjoyable factor, right? So many people look at it as, oh, it's just fuel for my body and I'm just going to eat it because it's fuel. But in reality, it's something that we should enjoy. Food is enjoyable, and eating the right foods and enjoying it makes it even better. I like this one. Number 2, don't get your fuel from the same place your car does. Gas stations are heavens for the latest and greatest food products, but they don't sell anything you should be putting in your mouth. When you go get gas for your car, try not to sneak into the gas station to purchase something. Good thing now is we can do all the paying right at the pump. We don't even have to go in. Number 3, try not to eat alone. Communal meals tend to help prevent overeating. Exactly why so many food marketing try to encourage us to eat in front of the TV or in the car, places where we mindlessly will eat more. Listen to your gut. Rely more on how your gut feels and how much food is on your plate when it comes to knowing when to stop eating. Number 5, eat slowly. Supposedly, it takes 20 minutes before your brain gets the signal that your belly is full. Like many of us, you take less than 20 minutes to finish a meal. You've eliminated the sensation of feeling full from even having the opportunity to express itself. Slowing down lets you get back in touch, not only with the sensation of what it feels like to be full, but also the pleasure you can get from each bite of food if you add a bit of mindfulness into the mix. In addition to the physiological benefits, slowing down at mealtime is an opportunity 3 times a day to exit the carousel of always feeling rushed and the benefits of what can trickle into the rest of your day by just enjoying your meal and eating slowly. Number 6, cook food. If you can, plant a garden. Reconnecting with the effort needed to grow and prepare food is one of the most profound ways of escaping our modern fast food culture, where food is cheap, easy, and instantly available. High quality organic food might be expensive, but you can grow food that is fresher and of better quality for nothing more than an hour of your time each week, depending on how big your garden is, of course, and a few dollars spent on seeds. 7, eat mostly plants, especially leaves. We may not know exactly what in plants is good for us, but we do know that plants are really good for humans to eat. So, as we've mentioned, eat plants. Leafy vegetables are always the ones that are most packed with nutrients. Eat wild food when you can. Wild plants, wild animals are much healthier and nutritious than their domesticated cousins. They defend themselves from pests and predators, no help from pesticides or antibiotics, and therefore have a much higher fitness required in order to survive. You are what you eat, so eating wild, healthy forms of life carries greater health benefits. Number 9, regard non-traditional foods with skepticism. New technology and innovation is great, but when it comes to food, old school is still king, and when we don't know enough about modern food products to say for sure they are safe, approach with caution. Don't look for a magic bullet in a certain type of diet. Just like food itself is much more than simply the sum of the nutrient parts, dietary patterns are more than just the foods they consist of. The Mediterranean diet is more than just olive oil. It's about the entire culture around food. We love to isolate from and simplify the diets of healthy people, but by doing so, we fail to truly grasp the more important picture that defines why that diet is healthy. So how you eat is important as well. So while many people focus on what they eat, few people talk about how they eat, which is as important and sometimes even more important than the actual food being ingested. Are you properly chewing your food? Is your body in a state where it can optimally digest your food? Do you eat to the point of discomfort? Do you eat meals or snacks? All of these factors, when combined, can have a significant effect on how your food recognizes, or how your body recognizes the food you eat, and whether it's able to use the nutrients that you consume. Chewing food is very important. A lot of people don't realize that chewing your food, is important, and we need to make sure we chew our food completely. So many people just couple chews and then they swallow it, and it's not even close to being chewed. There's a huge purpose of our teeth, and that is to initially start the digestion process. So the more that food is chewed, the easier it will be to digest. And another interesting thing about digestion is stress plays a role in digestion. So when the human body is under stress, digestion is no longer prioritized. Digestion is physically taxing and executes the task of breaking down ingested food into usable energy. Thousands of years ago, if we were being chased by a predator, the stress response was making sure to prepare you for action, and digestion simply wasn't important at that time. So when we were being chased by predators and trying to survive, our body's main use was to take energy and create it into muscle contractions so we can survive. And now, obviously, we don't have those predators chasing us. We have other stress aspects in life, but those stress aspects, which are constant, affect the digestion. Digestion just it won't digest your food properly, and that's why we have things like leaky gut syndrome and gut motility and intestinal issues, is because our body isn't digesting because we're constantly stressed, right? So today we might not be escaping predators, but the stresses of our modern daily life have really enacted the same stress response. And it's going to result in inhibiting optimal digestion. So we need to make sure we make an effort of being relaxed and having a calm state when consuming food. It's going to make a massive difference in how well our body digests and uses the nutrients from it. Now, I mentioned this regenerative agriculture earlier. Now, this is something that is starting to make a little bit more headway in mainstream media and in our society. And what regenerative agriculture is and how it can be described is a holistic land management practice that leverages the power of photosynthesis in plants to close the carbon cycle and build soil health, crop resilience, and nutrient density. So this is an ideal system to invest in, that it restores an integral part of our food nutrient provider, which is the soil. So soil provides many of the vitamins and minerals that plants can then provide us in a bioavailable form. Poor soil means poor nutrients, which can translate to foods that are not as nourishing to our health. So the specific practice of agriculture works to improve soil health primarily through the practice that increase soil organic matter. This not only aids in increasing soil biota diversity and health, but increases biodiversity both above and below the soil surface, which increases both water holding capacity and really sequestering carbon at a greater depth, thus drawing down climate damaging levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide and improving soil structure to reverse civilization threatening human caused soil loss. Diversity is if allowed, creates the best situation for plants and animals to thrive and provide nutrient-dense food for humans. If we model our consumption on what the land provides, we end up with a plate that is primarily plant products with minimal animal consumption. That is always nose to tail. A great way to think of this is to use meat as a condiment, not the main course. This type of farming practice produces a system that provides more nutrients per acre than monoculture and factory farming practices can provide. The end result is healthier, thriving ecosystem and nutrient-rich soil that can create nutrient-rich food. Even if a vegetarian vegan lifestyle is a choice because of ethical reasons, choosing regenerative farming methods increases the nutrient density of the food and provides animals with life lived in nature. So regenerative agriculture is a really important aspect that we need to understand. We also need to make sure we're doing more of it for that exact reason. And when it comes down to meat, the color of your meat can really dictate and tell you how healthy and how well that animal ate. If you look at fish, for example, salmon is obviously a big fish that we all enjoy and eat here. And if you take a salmon that was freshly caught out of the ocean, was allowed to live its full life cycle, and you caught that salmon and you filleted it and you got ready to cook it, and then you went to the store and bought a farmed salmon and you filleted it and you got ready to cook it. Well, when you put them side by side before you cook them, what you will see is a considerable color difference. A salmon that is fresh from the ocean, that was allowed to live its full life cycle and eat the way it eats and swim the way it swims and do what it needs to do, you would see this really red, colorful, dark looking fillet. If you look at the farm salmon, you will see a light pink. So that there displays immediately that food that eats better, looks better, and is going to be healthier for you. And that's what the regenerative agriculture is trying to do as well. Is it's trying to provide animals with not only a environmentally healthy way of being and eating, but also to cultivate better food for us. So it helps them get the food they need and then eventually get the food we need. And you can really tell if you go get any type of meat, a steak, chicken, whatever. If you get the proper meat that the animal was allowed to be the way the animal should be, eat the way it should be, not given any sort of antibiotics. If you look at that meat, it looks considerably different than a meat of a unethical, poorly cultivated piece of meat on the other side. Like, you can just tell. It's the colors are just there, and that's what I think we need to understand more. Is if you look at a piece of meat and that color doesn't look right, it's because it's not right. It's not the type of food you should be getting. And like I said, your dollar is your vote. So the more dollars you put into the environmentally ethical cultivated farms, the better. So when it comes to nutrition, a lot of the times, in the media, in the news, we see a lot of bad news. But there is a lot of good news coming out, and I think we're starting to get a better understanding of nutrition. So discussing our current food situation can sometimes be a grim conversation, but we want to make sure we don't let it overshadow the good news. We are currently in a renaissance of healthy food. There's no question about it. The availability of fresh, real, nutritious food has been on the rise in the past 20 years. and continues to improve more every passing years. Farmers markets are popping up everywhere. Awareness of the food problem is on the rise, and people now have the opportunity to vote with their dollars for more availability of healthy food options. The timing is perfect for us as health professionals and health advocates during this post-industrial era of food to deliver simple, applicable knowledge to people looking to exit the Western diet without having to leave modern civilization. We have better choices now available to us than in the past 20 years, and simply need to make sure modern humans are empowered with the ancestral knowledge of how we should eat for optimal health. And I think that is how I'm going to leave this lecture, is think about eating how your ancestors would have eaten. Understand we have better choices. Understand that we have the ability to purchase what we want. We don't have to hunt for our food. We don't have to, go days without food because it's not available to us. Unfortunately, some people do, but a large majority don't. And what we need to do is help ourselves eat better and help those that do not have food security have food for them to eat, and making sure that it's healthy food. Right? A lot of the times, we have food banks, and when we give food for food banks, it's always just food products. Food security is a big thing, and we want to make sure that people that don't have food security have access to the right types of food. We have the access to the right types of food. Now we need to start making the right choices. All right, everyone. Hope you have a great day. I will put up a discussion topic for this lecture on discussion board. I'll also put that YouTube link on there. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.